So welcome to everybody to today's webinar. We've got a guest speaker this week, John Howard, who's a property expert. I don't use that word lightly. John's got many decades of experience, belied by his youthful looks, and he's been involved in, from his website, 3,500 property transactions, which is an amazing number. Some big developments and obviously small ones as well. He has a number of companies he runs, including estate agents and property developers and financial services companies, which I find quite interesting. And he's even got a couple of quite interesting ventures that in addition to traditional property investing. So, John, without any further ado, I was just going to ask you a few questions. So,
yeah, please do.
This may be an unusual one to kick off with,
but
what have been some of your mistakes in property? And what
well, that's always Tony. That's always a good one to ask. And I always say this at my seminars or when I'm speaking: you show me a property developer that hasn't made a mistake, and I'll show you a liar. And obviously, over 40 years, I've made quite a few. Interestingly, of course, people tend to come to me now and say, "Well, John, the great thing is if I come to you for help or for mentorship or advice, you've made the mistake, so I don't need to," which is probably true, to be honest with you. There's so many different things that can go wrong in property developing and investing. And today, really, what I was going to do was run through some of the different options. Most people know those options in what you can do in terms of investing in property, but also just give a couple of the reasons why you've got to be careful and it's so important that who you work with, because depending who you work with can be the difference, obviously, between success and failure. And there's a lot of rogues out there at the moment looking for your money and offering huge interest rates and all sorts of stuff. And I would, as always, say, if it sounds too good to be true, guess what?
Yes. I do, John, the fact that you own companies, including financial services, you'd be well aware that in financial services, there's a huge amount of regulation. And I too am a property investor, but not on the same scale as you. And it always strikes me as a stark contrast between property investing and financial services, where you have one extreme and the other. Because in property investing, there are regulations to follow, like building regulations and the like, and letting agents, some regulation. But compared to financial services, it's virtually unregulated, isn't it?
Tony, it's cowboy country. That's what it is. I call it cowboy country. To be an estate agent, you don't need a qualification. Yes. My father, who was a greengrocer, back in 1974, woke up one day when he was 60 years old and decided he wanted to be an estate agent. Next day, he bought one. And so literally, he knew nothing about estate agency. In fact, he was a very good greengrocer, but actually as an estate agent, although he's my father and I loved him dearly, he wasn't the best. So, you're right. There's and obviously property developers, you could say, is even worse because, especially, and I'm very passionate about this, where there's been some horror stories where people have lent a property developer quite a lot of money without taking a charge on the property, without having a legal agreement with them. It's absolutely madness. And then they wonder why there's a problem at the end or before the end, or they can't get the money back or whatever it might be. You've really got to take sound advice from an accountant, from the solicitors, and, do it professionally.
I couldn't agree more. It's very refreshing to hear that, John. That's why you're on this show, because we knew you were reputable. So if you were to invest today, you're starting again with, say, a modest sum. I suppose I'm putting you in your shoes with your customers here. How would you go about it? I don't say you'd go to John Howard.
No, but that's a great question. But I mean, there's so many different ways to invest in property. I know people who, I've got a great friend of mine who buys and sells lock-up garages, makes a fortune. I find it very boring, but I mean, he's got thousands of lock-up garages, and he started off, buying. I think he bought three in one auction once, and it's just snowballed from there. So there's lots of different ways of making money out of property. The most important thing, Tony, is whoever is to always invest in a property or the type of property that you're interested in. There's no point in investing in a type of property that you've got no interest in. So, for instance, if you like renovating cottages and you have an interest in it, then do that. If I
John, I think that's very sound.
Sorry, I've got no interest whatsoever in dealing in renovating a cottage, so it's no interest to me. So I always say, you know, there's lots of different ways of investing in property. Pick the one that interests you, because if you're not interested in it or not passionate about it, you won't do very well in it. And that goes for anything in life, really, doesn't it, Tony? So that's the first thing I'd say, which I think's really important. A small amount of money. I mean, there's people around, in educators, as they're called, who will if you give them £10,000-15,000, they will tell you that you don't need a penny to get into property and to make money out of property. Now, with all due respect to those people, unless you've got a joint venture partner who is putting the money up, and of course, you know, some of the people listening on the call today may well be that type of person. They may have some money. They're getting no interest in the bank whatsoever, and it's quite tempting to, when you're offered, you know, 10%, 15, 20%, or to do a joint venture with someone who has got experience. Just make sure they have got experience. Look at them, look at their track record. Make sure that, you know, they're not using you to learn themselves, that they know what they're doing. But certainly investing with someone else like that, as a joint venture, as long as it's all legally tied up professionally and properly, may well be one, you know, certainly one way of doing it. I mean, over the years, I've had a number of financial backers, and I always go and find the deals, and they normally find the money. And you know, as long as you're doing long as each person knows what they're doing, their responsibility, that's very important. And one quick tip I would give you, if you are going to do a joint venture with someone, for goodness sake, make sure they're not taking any money out of the deal until there's a profit at the end.
Yes.
So many people I speak to, and I've got a joint venture fund which we've launched in the last year to invest. So I'm investing, putting in the junior debt, the top 30% that the bank won't do, if you like, into a number of developments across the UK at the moment. And as soon as they say to me, these people, oh, well, of course, I need 50,000 a year to live off. Thank you very much. Deal's over. Because, you know, you're not there for them to be delving into your deposit account every month for the tune of £5,000 to fund their lifestyle. You know, they need to do that on their own. And I've never, ever taken any money off any investor or my backers until the deal is done and we have a dividend at the end. And that's that way. There's no arguments. Everyone knows what they're doing, Tony. And it's only the fair way. You've got to give your investor confidence that one, you know what you're doing, and two, you're not you're being genuine and authentic. And that's so important. So that's one way in which certainly you can invest in property passively, if you like, to a point, but you've got to keep your eye on the ball. You know, if you're a joint venture partner, you don't need to be having dinner every night with them. You don't need to be going on holiday with them. It's a business transaction. You need to respect the other person. It's a bit like a football manager. A football manager may not be liked by his players, but he's respected. And as soon as that respect goes, you've heard the saying, Tony, they lose the dressing room. And what that means is, and I owned a football club for 18 years, or part of one, Cambridge United. Really? So I know we had to sack many managers. So as soon as they've lost that dressing room, they've lost confidence in the manager has to go, because you can sack the manager, you can't sack 20 players. So it's as simple as that. And the same with joint ventures. If you want to go out on your own and find a deal, I've spent 40 years dedicated my life really to finding property deals. Now, I'm not very good at it, Tony, or it's very, very hard to do. Well, it's one or the other. So, because finding the right deal that you want to do is very, very hard, especially now, because what you've got now, you've got and all due respect to these people, you've got thousands and thousands of people looking to get invested, buy into property for different reasons. A lot of people have been successful in their own business and now want to delve into property, and they will always look at margins, lower margins than what I work on. So I try and work on 30% net profit on every deal I do. I try to work on 30%. Now, if they're big deals, and I mean big deals, sort of 5 million plus, it's very hard to get more than 20% out of those because of the size of them and what you have to do and so on. But the smaller deals, I work on 30% net profit. Now, the reason I do that is because if it all goes wrong, I'm still making 15% probably. If I'm only looking at 10 to 15% profit, which is some people, investors are doing, it's not enough. Because if that goes wrong, you're soon underwater. So you've got to be cautious, you've got to be patient, and you've got to find the right deal that suits you.
Yes. So John, it's all great stuff. I find it very, very illuminating. So what do you feel has made you one of the more successful investors compared to others? What do you think?
My wife says I've got one. I've only got one talent, and that is dogged determination. So there is something in that. What I would say is there are lots of property developers who have been a lot more successful than me.
Yes.
However, I've done okay. There's always someone doing better than you, always. But over the years, I think I work very hard. I know an awful lot of people. Contacts are so important. You know, most places in the UK, I can pick up the phone to someone and go, you know, hi Mike, how you doing? Hi Isabel, I've got this potential deal near you, because I know lots and lots of people. And I used to always try and meet one new person a day. Yes. One new person a day. Now that's all changed with LinkedIn and social media. You know, I've got probably a few thousand people who think they know me. I probably don't know them very well, but you know, that's just how it's all changed. Absolutely, we're all the same. We all know people, or they think they know you, and so on. And that's all changed, Tony. I understand that, but having contacts and also sticking to decent, honest, genuine people, because you know, I always say there aren't many of us, so we have to stick together. And I think that's in property, especially, that's very true. There's an awful lot of new breed of developers. Some are very good. Some aren't, but experience is so important because there's not much I haven't seen over 40 years, and one of the reasons people are attracted to working with me on my as a joint venture partner, both ways, by the way. So if I'm investing in their deal, they want the benefit of my experience throughout the project, and if we've got high net worth individuals who want to invest in one of our developments I'm doing or a deal, then again, they're coming to us because one, of my track record, and two, the most important thing, the second thing, the most important, number two, is to know when something goes wrong, what to do. And that is as important. You know, you learn more when there's a problem or difficulty in your life than when everything's going easily. When the market's going up, the sun's shining, everyone's happy. Even if you make a mistake, Tony, inflation gets you out of it.
Yes.
Gets you out of it. But John, it doesn't do that. It doesn't do that in a tough market. And that's where people like me come into our own, because we know if it starts going wrong, we know what to do because we've been there before and we've managed to, you know, sort it out. I've survived 3 recessions, property recessions.
John, I've noticed there's been quite a substantial number of changes in recent years to property. But I mean, on the buy-to-let side, obviously, the government is attacking. Well, you can only describe it as attacking private landlords, particularly individual landlords. And then, of course, recently there's been an absolutely, how can I put it, revolutionary change to commercial property. You know, the planning permissions with all of the various bans for permissions. There's going to be huge opportunities, I feel, to develop and change of use that used to be very.
There are massive opportunities, Tony, and I'm involved with an MP. We've got an initiative which I've come up with, which is to all the first floors and second floors of these town centres in Suffolk and Norfolk, where I'm based, we're going to the Chancellor for a fund in order to with the MPs knocking on number 11's door, not me, but it's on our behalf. And the whole point of the fund is to put older people into town centres on first floor levels with lifts and a communal lounge, and also we're putting in a somewhere where people can stay, so guests can stay. And the reason we're doing that is because it's a very hot topic. So what it does, we're going to work with a housing association. What it does, it releases family homes for families to live in. So there's all these people around the country, especially Norfolk and Suffolk, who are living in a 3-bedroom semi-detached house on their own, rattling around, if you like. So the idea is that we put them in the town centres, not young people that can cause trouble and all the rest of it, older people in the town centres, where they've got all the amenities. They don't need a car, they've got all the amenities, they've got a lift to the first floor and so on. So that's one of our, that's an initiative that I'm doing along, hopefully with hopefully with the government. So and that ticks a lot of the government boxes. So with the government, they're desperate to get these town centres alive again, and that's one way I think it could be done. And obviously commercial, like you said, Tony's totally changed. You know, the old days, and there's some people on the call, I'm sure, who remember 21-year leases, you know, weren't they? They were the days, weren't they, when you got someone signed up to 21-year lease. Now, even if it's a good covenant, and I've got Eurocar and people like that, and Leyland Paint as tenants, you know, getting more than 3 years out of them or 5 years out of them is almost impossible. So all the financial banks, the banks and everyone financial has had to relook at how they lend money on commercial, because, you know, you only get 3 or 5 year leases. What they're saying to me, and I borrow money on my investments, is that we'll lend you the money for the term of the lease. Where if the term of the lease is only 3 or 5 years, you know, that's, so just be careful out there with you know, if you're looking at commercial, that's absolutely fine, but, you know, check out that the tenant is going to be staying and isn't in financial trouble, especially at the moment. So the one thing about PD, permissive development, office to residential, very simple. It takes 56 days to get it. It's a great scheme the government has brought out, but three things you've got to remember with PD. One is that you need to supply cycle storage. Now, you might say cycle storage, but that's no problem, go anywhere. If you've got a block of, say you're converting 20 flats, you might need 40 cycle spaces, and that is a lot of spaces. And if you're buying an office building, you may not have any external space at all, so be careful with that. The other thing, be careful, because they can turn you down on that if you can't find it. The other thing they can turn you down on is if you haven't got any bin stalls, if you haven't got any external space for bin stalls. And again, I know people have bought an office thinking they could get PD and haven't managed to. So if you're going to buy an office, just make sure you get the PD on it first before you purchase it, just to make sure that it's all okay. Now, recently, they've allowed you to put 2 more floors on. So if you've got an office building, you can put 2 more floors on under PD, permissive development. But that's not as simple to get as they make out. So you definitely need to speak to a planning consultant. It's not as straightforward as just getting normal PD on an existing building. The extra 2 floors is much more of a challenge. They can stop it in a number of different ways. So just be careful.
Very interesting, very useful advice, I think there, John. So can you tell us a bit about the, I noticed on your website, you've got 2 things I thought were quite interesting. One was the JH Joint Venture Fund, and also,
yes,
I'm a bit envious of you because I run a financial services company, but I don't have a Tony Byrne bond, but you've got a John Howard bond. I'm intensely jealous. So what
okay, so what happened was one of my main business partners decided to retire after 35 years. He said he's had enough of me, which I find after 35 years a bit galling. I could mention that he doesn't do a lot of work anyway, so I'm not sure why he's retiring, but he's an accountant, so I won't say that. Although he never practiced as an accountant. So Jeremy is retiring, and a guy called Christian Burrows, who I've known for 20 odd years, approached me and said, look, John, would you like would you like to have a regulated bond? So I said, well, I don't know much about regulated bonds. He said, well, the idea is that we'd raise money on a regulated bond. It's listed on Euronext, which is the largest exchange in Europe. We offer 9% interest per annum. The money's tied up for 5 years. Obviously, if you can put your pension money in it and so on, which is useful. The reason it's tied up for 5 years is because if anyone tells you, well, other people have a bond maybe, and they say to you, well, you can get your money out within 18 months or a year, you won't, because property, to do any development of any size, probably takes 3 years to get your money out. So that's why ours is 5 years, because that way we know we can pay everyone back and everything else. 3 years is too short, and certainly some of them are a year and a half. Absolutely crazy. Obviously, it's for high net worth individuals only. We're not looking. You can put your ISA in it as well, but we're not looking for. People like my mother to put 100,000 in or 50,000 in. It's not that sort of bond, and I wouldn't encourage. I wouldn't encourage that. But certainly, if there's any high net worth individuals who are looking to put their money somewhere and also want I mean, they can sit alongside us and get involved in the developments as well if they want. At the moment, we're buying a few what I call distressed stock. So we're buying part finished properties where they've gone bankrupt at auction or whatever. At the moment we paid 1.8 million for 20 part finished houses end of last year in Birmingham that went to an auction, didn't sell. Bank went bankrupt. The builder went bankrupt. That's the sort of thing we're buying at the moment. We're just buying another one, hopefully in Oldham, and so on. So that's the type of deal we're looking at: finishing them off, getting them finished, and getting them sold. So, but if people don't want to invest, tie the money up for 5 years, we can do one-off deals for high net worth individuals. So it's always worth talking to us.
John, I think I'm excited about talking to you myself after this call. So you can expect a call very soon. This bond, this John Howard bond, can I get this right? So to me, it seems a very generous rate of interest. But is that effectively your borrowing costs for these developments? Is that what you're saying? Using this funding for the developments? Is that
yes. So what we're doing with the fund? So what we're doing with the fund, we're doing two things. First, we're using it to invest in deals for ourselves. And the second thing we're using the money for is to invest in other people's deals. So, for instance, and that's where the joint venture fund comes in. So, for instance, anybody can speak to us and contact us and say, look, John, I'm buying a permissive development scheme, say an office building for 10 flats. I'm paying 500,000 for it. I'm spending 500,000 on it, and it's worth 1.5 when it's finished, when they're sold. And we'll say, okay, we'll lend you the junior debt. So we'll put up the deposit, if you like, that the bank won't do. Most banks will do 65% loan to value. So we'll put up the balance, and they'll do all the build costs. So we put up the junior.
Banks are happy with that. Are the banks happy with that? Because your 30%, is that a loan, or is that just a
okay? So it's investing into the company. So the company, a new SPV is owned 100% by the person, not us. We invest that money into the company. They purchase the property. They take out the loan. We ask for a second charge on the money, and then we split the profit 50-50. I'm happy, obviously, to see them to advise and see them through the development. The only money they should have to put into a development like that would be their stamp duty and their solicitor's fees. The rest of it should all be funded by ourselves or the bank.
Yeah, and would you advise that each investor would have like a special purpose vehicle for each development?
Definitely, absolutely. Every time on any development of any size, you definitely need to do that, just in case, a limited company, just in case something goes wrong. And once you've paid your tax on it at the end of the development, and then paid the tax and everything else, I would liquidate it and then set a new company up for the next one. Yeah.
It makes sense, because there's this legendary property development where things at times just go wrong, don't they? If you have all your properties in one company and one development goes wrong, they bring down the whole.
Well, there's absolutely, Tony. There's lots of cases of people who have got themselves into difficulty, sadly. And of course, I would say about this property, especially at the moment, where there are a number of schemes, and banks, of course, always tell you, and bridging companies especially, oh well, you know, we never have any problems, we never have any loans go wrong. Not much, they don't. They just don't like talking about it.
Of course.
And of course, really, part of my job, and of course for my investors or my partners or whatever, is to take advantage of that market. And unfortunately, you are sort of taking advantage of people who've had a misfortune, you know. But that's, you know, if you're worried about that, you're in the wrong business.
Yes, I agree. So, John, unfortunately, we're coming near the end of this presentation. Sorry about the technical issues we had at the start.
No, Tony, not a problem. I'd love to come back and do it again later on in the year, or if you want me to, I'll be very happy to. No problem at all.
Ask one last question before you go.
Yeah.
Your main advice you'd leave our viewers with if they want to step on the property ladder, what would be your advice to them?
I think that what I would say is it's very important to make sure you're organised. So if you're going to buy a property or project yourself, make sure you know that you've got the funding in principle. So mortgage brokers are very important these days. They've taken the place of the bank manager. I think you'd agree with that, Tony.
Yes.
You know, these bank managers. I mean, my bank manager, to be fair, does text me on a Sunday. Managing director, but it's only a small bank, to be fair, and he's based in Mayfair. But most of my other banks don't. So really, your broker's you need to find yourself a good broker, find out how much you can borrow safely and sensibly. Don't overgear. Don't, you know, be sensible. Take advice from your accountant and your solicitor. Get yourself ready to do the deal. So find a good solicitor if you haven't got one, a good mortgage broker. Decide what you want to do, because if you don't know what you want to do, how on earth is anyone else going to help you? Because when you talk to an estate agent or a deal sorcerer, as they call themselves these days, and all the rest of it, and you say, well, I don't know what I want to buy, well, they're not going to ring you up about anything. So you need to know what you can afford to spend, and you need to know what you want to buy. Now, that's if you're doing it all yourself. If you're not doing it yourself and you're going into a joint venture with someone else or loaning the money or whatever, but please do your due diligence on the person you're borrowing the money. If you can't do the due diligence, make sure your accountant does for you, because it's not hard to do these days. And you know, if they've had any problems in the past financially, you need a very good explanation as to why. Now, things can go wrong for people, and I understand that. But if it's happened more than once, I wouldn't touch them with a barge pole.
No, I understand.
But even if they've happened only once, I'd be very suspicious, sadly. So please do your due diligence. It's so important, you know, and make sure you take the advice of the accountant and the solicitor and get it all tied up, however charming the property developer might be.
Yes. Yeah.
Or the builder, or whoever they are. You know, don't be embarrassed to say to them, look, we need a legal agreement. Hopefully that legal agreement sits in the drawer and never comes out. If it comes out, you've got a problem.
Yes. John, it's been a great presentation. It's fantastic meeting somebody who's not only very trustworthy, but he's got a real passion for what he does. And it really comes through in this interview. I really felt it was quite an honour to interview you today, and I think the viewers I'm sure will agree. It's been fantastic. I'd love to invite you back at a later date. We get the technology right next time as well. So
yeah, not a problem. Tony, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to meet you and to speak to you.
Great. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye for now.